Mizmor LeDavid, Adonai mi yagor ba'alecha mi yishkain b'har kadeshecha. Holech tamim u'foyel tzedek v'doiver emes b'vavo. Lo ragal al l'shano lo asa l'rei ra'ah v'cherpa lo nasa l'kravo. Nivze be'enav nimas ves yirei Adonai yichabed nishba laharav lo yamir. Kaspo lo nasan b'neshech v'shoich al anaki lo lakach oise eila lo yimoit le'olam. Hasam Bey David, Hashem, who may sojourn in your tent, who may dwell on your holy mountain, one who walks in perfect innocence and does what is right, and speaks the truth from his heart, who has no slander on his tongue, who has done his fellow no evil, nor cast disgrace upon his close one, in whose eyes a contemptible person is repulsive, but who honors those who fear Hashem, who can swear to his detriment without retracting, who lends not his money on interest, nor takes a bribe against the innocent. The doer of these shall not falter forever. Yeshaya Tzvi ben Moshe Aryeh Cohen, Sherwin Goodman, was born in Charleston, West Virginia on December 7th, 1924. Quite an appropriate day, which on his 17th birthday became famous as the day of the Pearl Harbor attack. And shortly thereafter, before his 18th birthday, he joined the Navy. During the war, he corresponded with his high school girlfriend, Shirley Rubenstein, and in March of 1945, they were married and moved to Cleveland in 1947, where Sherwin went to Case Western Reserve and graduated as an accountant in 1949 and began his own practice shortly thereafter. They had two daughters, Linda and Sherry. Sherry shared with me how Sherwin was such a fun parent, as we can all imagine. He would take them motorbiking and skiing and boating. She had even had from a couple of front false teeth that he would wiggle for their friends. We can well imagine that we know what Sherwin was. We can well imagine what a wonderful parent he made. I've known Sherwin for about 7 or 8 years, as he has attended classes that I've been giving at the Jewish Learning Connection, an average of 3 times a week. He was a superb human being. The psalm that I just quoted, as I was reading it, it's a standard psalm, but I felt how appropriate and how it describes Sherwin so perfectly. Man of perfect innocence, does what is right, speaks the truth from his heart. There's no slander on his tongue. Never heard a negative comment about anybody else come out of his mouth. You can say he's done his friend no evil, nor cast disgrace upon his close one. He was good-humored and a real pleasure to have in your company. I have a lot that I would like to say, but before I continue, I would like to call upon Larry Rubenstein, a cousin of Sherwin's wife, Shirley, to share some feelings and stories. Larry obviously has known Sherwin a lot longer than I have.
Shalom. My name is Larry Rubenstein, and my father, Lee Rubenstein, was Shirley's brother. I've had the privilege of calling Sherwin uncle, although he was much, much more than that. He was family. Come with me for a moment as I turn back. Come with me for a moment as I turn back the clock to November of 1943. We were on the deck of the aircraft carrier USS Independence in the South Pacific, and the 18-year-old Sherwin Goodman, who had joined the Navy when he was 17, had become a turret gunner on a torpedo dive bomber called a TBF Avenger. The plane, with a crew of 3, a pilot, radio man, and gunner, was the workhorse of the Navy's carrier-based airplanes during the war. In order for an airplane to take off from a ship, it's connected to a catapult that pushes the plane off the ship at a high rate of speed with its engine running at full throttle, creating a push-pull force that sends the plane off into the air. On this November day, the routine of launching planes was broken by an unanticipated event, and I will let Sherwin describe what happened next, and I quote. As we were being launched as usual, I felt the plane slow down halfway through the launch. The plane flew off the end of the carrier at half the speed needed for takeoff. I saw the bow of the carrier float past my window as the plane sank lower into the water. I remember yelling as we hit the water directly in front of the carrier. I hit the release device on the side window of the turret, and it popped out. Leaping onto the port wing, I saw my pilot and radio man also escaping the sinking plane. The carrier was bearing down on us, and the ship hit us and sheared off the starboard wing, after which the plane sank in less than a minute. We then drifted for 10 minutes in large swells, waiting for a ship to pick us up. My life vest had a defect and did not inflate, so I was swimming the whole time. When the rescue ship did arrive, it passed within 10 yards and sent up a large wake. When it broke over us, I was pulled down and I panicked. I reached out for my radio man's foot and held on for dear life. He managed to kick me loose, and when I surfaced, I found myself alone in a very large ocean. I was tired. I kicked off my shoes and threw away my pistol and pack of rations. As I rose on the top of the swell, I spotted the other 2 crewmen some distance away. I kept sinking beneath the water, feeling so tired that I wanted to quit. Thinking of my family must have given me strength, for I started swimming toward the others. They later told me that I swam as if I had just gotten into the water, but I do not remember any of that. 10 minutes later, a lifeboat came and pulled us out of the water. Family. The thought which pushed Sherwin not to give up on that day became the foundation of the life that he lived. As Jerry reminded us yesterday, there are 3 words that define Sherwin: family, Navy, and Judaism. Family. As the rabbi mentioned, he was born in Charleston, and he learned quickly the value of hard work and the passion it takes to succeed in whatever you attempt. At the same time, he learned that having fun was an integral part of success, and wow, was he good at it. The larger-than-life legends of joy Sherwin and his brothers Paul and Jimmy created in their formative years made for millions of smiles. The stories are endless, and everyone who knows Sherwin has more than a few to tell. We all knew that twinkle in his bright eyes and the brilliant smile meant something fun was about to happen. Thus, it is fair to say that it would have been enough just to be a member of the Goodman family. But he did not stop there. Oh, no. Fortified by his service in the Navy, fighting a war, he took on an even bigger challenge. He married Shirley Rubenstein. And by default, took on the Rubenstein family under his wing. Not an easy task, I can assure you. Family to Sherwin meant responsibility. He was the Rock of Gibraltar, constantly surrounded by family hurricanes, dealing with each in turn like a personal family emergency management agency. He was the calm eye in the center of the storm, the bandage on the wound, the clear-headed advisor you needed to hear, and a respiratory of love that was always ready for giving. And Sherwin's definition of family knew no bounds. It included his many friends, his business partners, Joan and Shelley, his clients, his synagogue, and for the past 10 years, Shirley and the extended Epler family. I also add to this list his Navy family, forged in the fire of war, a lifetime of relationships based on the common experiences they all shared. Not only did he attend reunions and air shows, but also in the one-on-one conversations that he had no matter where he went, that always started with a, where did you serve? And if they were Navy, what ship? For you see, Sherwin was a repository of naval history that he constantly added to in the many books he read. I know, as he gave me the love of naval history, and for years we were constantly reading and discussing the latest books, a gift to my soul that I will never forget. Unlike many whose military service and exposure to the horrors of war defined them, Sherwin's Navy life enriched him. Experiences he shared with all who knew him and even future generations of school children who sat with rapt attention as he told his war stories over and over again, year after year, in order that the sacrifices of those who did not return be remembered. To stand next to Sherwin at the World War II Memorial had been some of the most emotional experiences of my life, as I saw the man who is a giant to me and many others shed many a tear. No thoughts of Sherwin would be complete without remembering those moments in which the twinkle in his eyes and the broad smile on his face led to mischief. Much more of it occurring when Aunt Shirley wasn't around. As we all have them, I will mention just one that to me was an essence of Sherwin. As my sister Stacy tells it, Sherwin had taken a group of cousins out on the Jubilee. Ah, yes, boating. Another part of Sherwin's soul that many of us shared with him, a freedom of being on the water and the lack of structure and boundaries that provided a healthy contrast to his work as a CPA. On this particular adventure, he had stopped the boat and everyone went swimming except for Stacy, as she had a cast on a broken arm. Sherwin, who had dived off the Jubilee's flying bridge, he liked to do that to the amazement of others and the horror of my aunt, encouraged her to also come into the water, to which Stacy declined. He then came back on board the boat, tied some plastic bags around her cast, picked her up and tossed her in the water, and jumped right in behind her. Quintessential Sherwin. And yes, the cast had to be replaced, and she loved every minute of it. I'm sorry. To all who know and loved him, our loss is incalculable. To me, he was truly my hero. His love of life, and food, of course, his living each day to the fullest and helping everyone along the way is an inspiration. While the brightness in his eyes and his radiating smile have dimmed, his spirit and his energy that he imparted on all of us will stay with us forever. That we will miss him goes without saying. It is said that a life well lived is a life well remembered, and the acts of kindness and selfishness are the bedrocks of memories. On behalf of all of your nieces and nephews and our kids, we want to thank you, Uncle Sherwin, for a lifetime of memories. Shalom, Uncle Sherwin. Shalom. Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Larry. Before I get into some personal things about Sherwin, I would like to just fill everyone in on the family. Sherwin was the oldest of 3 boys. His brother Paul predeceased him, and James, unfortunately, cannot be with us today, that his health did not allow him to make the travel. His daughters are married. Linda is married to Eric Grossman and Sherry to Jerry Reveal. And also many of their cousins are here. And I'm not sure if I'm going to list them all, but I was given a nice list of cousins that came in. Obviously, that shows how close everybody felt to Sherwin. Sherwin and his wife Shirley were married for, I think, just over 60 years. And as Larry mentioned, Sherwin was a real family man. He would travel to all the cousins' bar mitzvahs, and he would tell me that they would have family get-togethers every couple of years, and he would come back from them and tell me. Recently, they had one in Chicago, and he came back to tell me about these beautiful events where the cousins and everyone would get together. Shirley had a tremendous love for Eretz Yisrael, for the land of Israel. And after visiting there, I think it was in the late 60s, started her own volunteer organization called VCI, Volunteers for Clevelanders in Israel, to help people make Aliyah. We know in recent times there are organizations that have been started and are doing very well, but she probably was one of the first to really come up with such a organization. And she herself went to Israel 22 times. Sherwin was very involved in his wife's endeavors, but obviously could not join her on all of her trips, as he was a CPA and his clients probably wouldn't have appreciated it. After Sherwin's wife Shirley passed away, just over 10 years ago, I guess Sherwin liked women with the name Shirley. And therefore, Sherwin and Shirley Epler became companions, best of friends, for the last 10 years. Shirley's husband had passed away 10 years prior, and Sherwin had been their accountant. And therefore, they had socialized together as couples for many years and had known each other, Shirley tells me, for probably about 60 years. They had a wonderful relationship together, and they would come at least once a week together to my classes. And just speaking with Shirley's family, I spoke with Rita yesterday, and speaking with some of the family members here before the ceremony today, you could see the closeness and the tremendous loss that is felt, as they were real, sincere tears of pain. They really considered Sherwin to be part of their family, and they saw how much joy he brought to Shirley's life. Shirley's children and grandchildren are all here today. They would travel together and on vacations, and this lasted for 10 years. As I mentioned at the beginning of my comments, Sherwin joined the Navy at the age of 17, and he was a gunner in the turret of a Navy torpedo bomber. And he spoke about this to us in class very proudly. Once in a while, he would bring a book in. About 3 or 4 years ago, he brought a book in and showed everyone how this is a recent book that was written and how it had a story in there about him. The fact that we enjoyed Sherwin with us for so many years was truly due to God's tremendous providence watching over him. Sherwin said that when he flew on combat missions, he would say a prayer and carry a metal-covered siddur in a pocket over his heart. I think we all know there's a little siddur that covered in metal. He carried one with him during the war, and it was in a pocket over his heart. It did a good job. Larry mentioned about the time he ended up in the ocean. Well, a sequel to that story is that the next day, the same thing happened to another plane, and the crew of that plane was not so fortunate, because when the plane hit the water, some of the bombs went off, killing all 3 of the crew. Another time, anti-aircraft fire went right through the turret. Missed Sherwin. On another mission, they flew for 3 hours to find a fleet of Japanese Navy boats that were coming, and his crew was responsible for sinking a Japanese cruiser, for which he then received a very special medal. Sherwin was very generous with his time. Shirley Epler's daughter, Rita, told me that when her daughter was in school, they invited Sherwin down to Columbus to speak on Veterans Day. And once he did it once, he came back every year. As a matter of fact, I remember this year, he also went down to Columbus. He went down with Shirley, and he spoke all day. And I remember he came to class, and he said, "We just drove up from Columbus today after speaking for all the students." So here's a almost 91-year-old man driving to Columbus, speaking all day. I think probably slept over, came back, but drove back to Cleveland, and then came to class. He was a very kind-hearted person. He would come to a class that we'd have Tuesday morning, and in our building, there's a group of young men, Kolomem, who are studying. And Sherwin would see that they would come in every morning before they started their learning session, and they would start with their cup of Keurig coffee. And he saw how quickly they were going through the Keurig cups. So guess what Sherwin would do quite often? He would bring in a case of Keurig cups for the young men to have. Sherwin was a Kohen, and very proud of it. In our studies, we would often come across different topics, obviously, that related to Kohanim specifically. And he was our resident Kohen in the class, and whenever we would discuss it, he would have a big smile, because he was our resident Kohen that would be obviously involved in the discussion. Sherwin had a very pleasant demeanor, and people told me that he was an extremely gracious guest. He enjoyed the food and would express his appreciation to the hostess, and she would, obviously that makes people feel very, very pleased, and very, it's something they would desire, obviously, to have such a person like that back with them. Sherwin always had a smile, always had a very pleasant demeanor, a cute remark or a comment on any occasion. The last time I saw him was 6 days before he passed away. It was Friday morning in Ahuja. And I got there, it was about 8:30 in the morning, at 8:45, and he was just waking up. And the first thing he said was, I need my boost. Right? That's this power drink that gave him a little boost. But the way he said it, if there's one, I need my boost. Right? He was lying in the hospital. We didn't realize how much of a decline he had really made. But you never heard a complaint. It was never, never a kvetch. Due to his wife's Shirley's involvement with VCI, they hooked up with Taylor Road Synagogue. And when a large segment moved out to Beechwood and formed the Beechwood Kehillah, they moved along, and Sherwin would go there every Shabbos. It was a highlight of his week, and even when he was sick the last 3 months, he would keep mentioning to me, next Shabbos I'll feel better and I'll be able to go to shul again. Unfortunately, I don't think that happened the last 3 months. I'm not sure. He became very close with many families there and became a regular at their Shabbos table. He was always a fun and interesting guest. Always had lots of stories. And David Wilkoff told me he would share with him many stories about the war as well. Shortly after retiring, Sherwin started attending my classes at Jewish Learning Connection. It first started only once a week, and quickly he became a fixture, attending an average of 3 classes a week. He had a tremendous thirst for knowledge. And again, we're talking where he didn't start the classes till he was almost in his mid-80s. And he would listen carefully, remembering what we covered. Shirley would accompany him to the evening classes. And last winter, I think we were very fortunate this winter. Last winter, if you remember, it was very, very cold. And on Wednesday nights, often it was 0 degrees outside, and the conditions were not pleasant, and it was slippery. And the door would open, and Sherwin and Shirley would come walking into the building. Someone half their age would make an excuse and say, I couldn't come out because of the weather. I had, thank God, a wonderful rapport with Sherwin. Sometimes when he would be there on Tuesday, I would tell him what I'm planning to speak, either on a Tuesday evening class or Wednesday evening class. I would tell him something that, tomorrow evening I'm planning to speak about this and this, and I'm going to ask the group a question. So I would tell him the question, and I would feed him the answer. And then Wednesday evening, when I would get up and I would say, anybody know, and I would ask this question, and Sherwin would raise his hand and give the answer, and everyone thought that he was, but that was Sherwin's personality. It was something that it was something that he obviously loved and appreciated to be part of such a thing, because it was like pulling shtick. It was doing something that was cutesy, that was very appropriate and fit in perfectly with his personality. Yeah, he had a very blessed life. Until shortly after he turned 91, he ran around more actively than most men do who are 20 years his junior. He loved to drive, and he would tell me about his trips. And, even in recent times, he would go with Shirley. I mean, I couldn't believe it, but he would tell me that, he just drove to New York and back. And made it sound, right? I know most people have to, to go on a little drive, but he made it sound like it was just great. We just got in the car and we drove to New York for a couple of days, and we drove back. And then they would go to North Carolina, the next weekend or something. It was a tremendous, but because of his simcha, his joy of life, this was something that came natural to him, and thank God he had the strength and ability to do it. And we thought he was going to be around for a long time. Unfortunately, that was not the case. But again, God was very kind to him, because his decline was just over a 3-month period. And it appeared to us that old age just caught up with him overnight. And all of a sudden he was acting his age. Thank God during the last 3 months, he had no pain. There was just some discomfort, just a gradual decline, weakening. I visited him in his apartment, and he could walk a little bit, but you could see that he definitely had made a very significant decline. Sherwin was a very dear friend. A real pleasure to have around. And he's going to be sorely missed. I'd like to call upon Rabbi Simcha Man for the Kel Male. Please rise.
Kol molei rachamim shoichein bameroboimim Hamitzei menucha nechoino Ale kanefei ashechino B'ma'alois kedoshim utaharim Kizoyar horoki amazirim Es nishmas Rabbi Yeshaya Tzvi ben Moshe Aryeh HaKoyen Sheholach lo ilamoy Bavur shebnei mishpachtoy Maskirim es nishmosoy Began Eden etehei menuchosoy Lochein bal rachamim yastireyu b'seise knafov liyoilamim v'yitzror b'yitzror achayim es nishmosoy Adonai hu nachalosoi V'yonuach b'shalom al mishkavoi V'noimar Amen
You can sit down. Interment will be at Hillcrest Memorial Park. The family will receive friends at 2112 Acacia Park Drive in the room, party room on the main floor, and that will be today until after the burial until 5 p.m. and then from 7 p.m. until 9 p.m. this evening. Then on Tuesday and Wednesday evening from 7 to 9, it will be at the room in Point East. Friends who wish may contribute to Jewish War Veteran, post number 44, or Beachwood Kahila, or the Jewish Learning Connection.